Okay. Do you also think that determinism and indeterminism are labels for different types of models?
Yes.
So we think we're making a statement about the facts of the world, but determinism and indeterminism are statements about the facts of models.
Yes, that's what I think. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Is it the case then that determinism/indeterminism just is not something that it would be a category error to apply to the world, or we just don't know which one is applied to the world?
Uh,
I can make it clearer for people who are wondering what the heck I meant. So,
yes, please.
look, take this cup. We can say, what is the electric charge of this cup?
Yeah.
And of course, it's exchanging molecules with it. Okay, but it has somewhat of a well-defined electric charge. We could also say, what is the total electric charge of the universe? But then I could ask you, what's the electric charge of $55? And then you would say, well, a $55 bill, this $55, and I don't know. I say of $55, just, and then you're like, it doesn't have it would be foolish to give it a 0 electric charge, just as much as it would be foolish to give it plus 20 electron volts or minus 28 or what have you.
Yeah.
In that case, it would be the label of electric charge to the concept $55 would just be, it would be foolish. It just doesn't apply.
Yeah.
So what I'm wondering is, we can apply the label of determinism to a model. We can apply the label of indeterminism to a model. And then you were saying, well, there's that's a model. Then there is the world, the reality. Maybe reality is not the word I should use. Can indeterminism/determinism also be applied here, or is it foolish to?
It's not foolish. So like Richard Montague said, a system is deterministic exactly if it's a model of a deterministic theory. Well, but you see, that makes the whole thing ambiguous, because as I see it, the notion of determinism is broad enough. It doesn't imply classical causation or anything, that whatever phenomena come up, there will be possible representations of them as deterministic and possible representations of them as indeterministic. And so the question just doesn't arise for the world. There will always, so suppose we agree for a moment with Richard Montague. A system is deterministic if it's a model of an indeterministic theory, right?
Okay.
If it's a model of a deterministic theory. Now, in that case, you should also have to say a system is indeterministic if it fits into a model of an indeterministic theory. Right? And I would say in the case of real phenomena, it's always both. It's always, in principle, both. Now, that doesn't mean that we actually have the other theories, but there's always, in principle, enough logical leeway.
Okay.
I mean, look at what happened in quantum mechanics. I mean, the many universe theory is deterministic. Yeah, right. I mean, in certain respects, you can say it's not deterministic, but as a whole, there are many universes together.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. In the case of David Albert's theory about the past hypothesis, the world is not. It looks like statistical randomness, but it is totally determined. Yeah. This kind of logical alternative is always there for representation. And so, to me, the only question that makes sense is, can we represent it this way? Can we represent it that way? And there are certainly limits, but the limits are never so strict as not to allow some kind of determinism, some kind of indeterminism.
Okay. So if I understand what you're saying, it's that there's always wiggle room to come up with some deterministic theory that fits the data. There's always wiggle room to come up with an indeterministic theory that fits the data as well. So it's just under determination as to whether it's deterministic.
Right, exactly.
Okay. What about free will? What are your personal views on free will?
Yeah, that I have free will, certainly. Yes. But I also realize that it's a very difficult concept to narrow down. I was listening just quite recently in Austria, I listened to a lecture in which there was an argument that if there's no free will, then we're not accountable for anything morally, right?
Uh-huh.
And so then in the question period, I raised my hand and I said, I grew up in a Calvinist country, and according to Calvinism, the doctrine of predestination, certain Calvin himself, there's no free will, but their moral views are such that we are very accountable. We're all held accountable for what we do. So, what exactly, what is your philosophical enterprise here? He had said, I'm doing meta ethics, right? And I said, here's an ethical theory that you are just ruling out by fiat. Now, mind you, to begin, it sounded very plausible to me what he was arguing. I mean, if I'm not free to do what I do, then how can you hold me accountable, right? But that is just turns out to be just one position, one ethical position. It's not a logical. There is no logical argument there. So, can I define free will? No, I haven't. I have not. I mean, it's not. It's not a part of philosophy that I have been very active in to begin. But certainly, what I've come across, I can see the connections between accountability and freedom, certainly. But my inclination is to say, I'm convinced by arguments from Sartre that uh, we are free and up to the point where we really have no rational consciousness at all. So he says, even if you are a prisoner, you're free to accept your fate or revolt mentally against it. Right? You can live very differently as a prisoner. One way and sort of revolt against your own fate, and one as accepting it. So, is that still freedom? Well, don't ask me how to find the boundary there.
What does Sartre mean when he said up until your rational consciousness ends? Maybe I misquoted right there.
I mean, suppose that you are in such pain that you can't really think anymore, right? Maybe then you have no choice left, right? You're not free anymore. You're still alive. You're in pain. You are crying, but you can't make choices anymore. Yeah.
This is super interesting because he used the word rational there. Now, Kierkegaard would say that you have a choice and it's somehow non-rational. It's not rational. So it sounds to me, these two existentialists, or two people who are classified as existentialists, one is saying your choice or your free will, or let's just say choice, matters. It depends on your rationality. And it sounds like Kierkegaard is saying you have a choice that absolutely does not depend on rationality and can't in principle for you to switch your value systems. So who's right?
Well, I think that Sartre agrees with Kierkegaard that you cannot give a rationally compelling basis for your choice that would hold for everyone, that would hold universally, ever. Okay. He says, it's your call to decision. It's your decision. You will not be able to give a reason that says, I could not do otherwise. You can never do that. You can never say, I could not do otherwise, right? So it's not rational in the sense of based on a rational justification. But at the same time, Sartre, many philosophers don't seem to realize this. Sartre is a very logical thinker. He takes everything to logical extremes, mind you. But he's pointing out, once you see that, you have to draw the consequence that you are free. You are free, and that any way to somehow deny this philosophically is probably going to end up as a case of false consciousness.
And false consciousness just means what?
Well, there's two forms of false consciousness. One is just to say, look, I was born this way. I can't help myself. This is how I'm made, right? And the other form of false consciousness is to say, yeah, I know I was doing all those things, but don't look at that. I can always do. I'm. That's just my past, right? Kind of denial of the. So you either say that you are rock bound, or you say no, I'm free. My past doesn't define me. Both are false consciousness.
The Economist covers math, physics, philosophy, and AI in a manner that shows how different countries perceive developments and how they impact markets. They recently published a piece on China's new neutrino detector. They cover extending life via mitochondrial transplants, creating an entirely new field of medicine. But it's also not just science. They analyze culture, they analyze finance, economics, business, international affairs across every region. I'm particularly liking their new Insider feature. It was just launched this month. It gives me a front row access to The Economist's internal editorial debates, where senior editors argue through the news with world leaders and policymakers in twice weekly long format shows. Basically, an extremely high-quality podcast. Whether it's scientific innovation or shifting global politics, The Economist provides comprehensive coverage beyond headlines. As a TOE listener, you get a special discount. Head over to economist.com/TOE to subscribe. That's economist.com/TOE for your discount.